So, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to another session of our Accelerator Partner Series webinars. Today's webinar is going to be about artificial intelligence. My name is Tom Rose. I'm a technical channel account manager here at Trend Micro, focusing on product training and technical sales strategies for our national channel partners. Presenting with us today is Bill Malik, our VP of Infrastructure Technologies. Bill has been with Trend for just over 6 years. He also has a really cool podcast called Real Cybersecurity, which I see they're up to 68 episodes, which is incredible. I would invite everybody after the webinar to go check it out and take a listen. We'll have a link for you guys at the end to be able to do that. So today, we're going to explore the fascinating world of AI and its impact on our lives. We will discuss the basics of AI, its applications, how it's transforming various industries. Bill will share his insights on the latest trends in AI and how we can leverage this technology to drive innovation and growth in organizations. Bill will also discuss the general capabilities of AI, what it can and cannot do, as well as explain how bad actors are using AI and how they're not quite using it yet. At Trend, we've been using AI for almost 20 years now to help secure our customers. So we'll also touch on experience with that, as well as how generative AI can help in the Security Operations Center. And finally, we'll discuss future possibilities of AI and what it will likely do. And in summary, this webinar will provide you with valuable insights into the world of AI. And just to summarize again, a few key takeaways from the webinar is going to include understanding the risks and rewards of generative AI, navigating the security threats associated with AI, and identifying key questions to ask when planning a cybersecurity strategy. So if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to use the questions chat. If you have any comments or any things you want to just add, you can put them in the regular chat, and I'll do my best to answer questions as we go. If we can't answer them during the presentation today, we will follow up in an email. And one last thing before I hand it over to Bill, this entire intro was written with ChatGPT, right? Work smarter, not harder. All right, over to you, Bill.
Hey, thanks very much, Tom, and thanks to ChatGPT for the heavy work doing there. So I've been with Trend for a little over 6 years. I've been in IT for almost 50 years. So I got 10 Gladwells behind there. I was a developer, wrote code for mainframes, worked at Gartner for 11 years. I ran the information security service there. I was CTO of a startup in identity management, and like I said, joined Trend about a little over 6 years ago. Now I've got some slides that I want to take you through, but they're mainly to illustrate the talking points. Certainly they'll be available to you if you want afterwards. So let me bring these up now. And let me bring up the right slide. There we go. So yeah, I'm Bill Malik, VP of Infrastructure Strategies, and the topic today is how generative AI can help the SOC, and we're going to go beyond that and talk a little bit about what good and bad is happening with AI generally. So general capabilities of AI. Can't talk about it very far without talking about what's going on in everybody's head when they hear AI. Here are some things that happened. The book Runaround, which was originally published in 1942, was a short story by Isaac Asimov, turned into iRobot almost 20 years ago. And for those of you that are more visual, here are some of the classic scenes. That's M5 on the top right from Star Trek, and the bottom left is Kirk's court-martial for apparently killing one of his officers, but in fact, the system was tampered. And of course, who can forget the Charlie Terminator or the Matrix? Here's where we get to what AI can do and can't do. If you ask AI to identify this object in the screen, it'll tell you it's a feather. It may tell you what bird it came from. What it can't tell you is that if you're an author living in the 18th century, you're looking at a pen. If you're a Cheyenne warrior, you're looking at a symbol of honor. And if you're an 8-year-old kid playing a game where he thinks he's a spy, it's a mustache. The point is that what AI can do relates to physical attributes, but it doesn't relate to function. Function is how the thing's used in a social context, and that's what AI doesn't and never will get around to knowing. If we were to take the stops off and ask it, what is this? It could say, Well, it's contrails when somebody spilled their coffee out the window of a jet. Any possible combination of words and meanings, but nothing actually meaningful would happen from this. AI can help when it's a well-defined domain. When it's a wide open domain, it sometimes gets lost. Bad guys are using AI, not that much because, frankly, they don't have to. It's pretty easy if you're a bad guy to just get what you want through, using a 3-year-old exploit, running a 25-year-old email scam. And so what's going on right now is we do hear about virtual kidnapping, people using AI to generate messages that sound like they come, hey, grandma, I made a mistake. I'm in trouble. There are kidnappers. You got to send money. Click. And it sounded like it was the granddaughter's voice. AI deepfakes, not so much. There are people hacking around with it at the edge, revenge porn, that kind of nonsense. But by and large, people are doing this with Photoshop, not so much with the more expensive tools because it's easier, path of least resistance. We do see people using AI to generate code for hacking. You have an example of 5 things that work. Ask ChatGPT to come up with 8 more, and it'll come up with 8 more. They won't all work. They have to be QA'd, but they'll be, good starts. And one interesting subgroup is a lot of hacker organizations are scamming each other by claiming they've got GTP clone systems that can produce really scintillatingly attractive phishing emails, spear phishing emails, that kind of stuff. But we just don't see it having that big of an impact on the market yet. By and large, the bad guys are following the path of least resistance. So what do we do with AI? Information security. Tom mentioned we have been using fuzzy logic and ML to track down scam emails since 2004. You can be more attractive with this one weird trick. Well, so we block that. And then the bad guys change the one weird trick to one WE1RD, TR1CK. And now you've got to use an ML tool to say, okay, they're trying to say this, and broaden the search and soften it. Where it is also being used, and this is very current, is in the case of Vision 1, you can form a query in an English, in a natural language, and ask our AI to generate the appropriate SQL statement to be able to go after the information in the database. So you see, an evolving threat, and it occurs to you to ask, how many people have seen this email with this attachment? And then you stop and say, oh, gee, how do I put that into SQL? And how many? Well, AI can do that, and it does it very well. It does it very fast because it's a bounded set. There's not an unlimited number of possibilities. There's a very strictly well-defined set of possibilities that can operate on. And similarly, taking the output from an information security process and translating that rather stilted, rocky prose into something that's more like everyday language, so you can put it into an email or a message on the message board saying, this kind of attack seems to be in progress, so everybody take care. So AI helps the SOC. AI helps information security. It helps us get ahead of things. So what are its limits? I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and one of the speakers was Wendy Nather. Now, she's a kind of a big deal in information security circles. She's a sought after speaker. She's done RSA and the whole tour. She's now working for Cisco. And they put together a bio for her at a conference she was at the start of the year, and it had a ChatGPT generated profile. And it said that she worked for the National Security Agency for 5 years. Wendy Nether never worked for the National Security Agency. But you see, ChatGPT took a look at the words that were there, and it decided based on its statistical ranking algorithm that when you ever see these words, then you're going to see the words worked at the National Security Agency. And it'll get them in the right order, not because it understands grammar, but because it understands the statistical likelihood of she being followed by a word like worked, being followed by a word like national, etc. So there's no thinking going on here at all. And you've seen academic papers. Some of them are still available out there. ChatGPT authored papers with references, citations, and all that, saying how good it is for us to eat crushed glass, how important it is to feed babies ground porcelain. You may have heard the case just a couple of months ago about the lawyer down in Florida who had ChatGPT put together a brief for a court filing, and it had done everything right. It had the fonts right, the formats right, the pleadings right. It even had cited cases right. The only problem was it was completely fictitious. The citations didn't exist. The titles were just what ChatGPT felt like statistically a likely title would look like. And it was complete nonsense. And the lawyer was fined, I think, was it $1,000 or $5,000 for putting this up on the court. So be real careful when you use this. And the big concern is the use of ChatGPT to forge academic papers, both for student schoolwork and for others. I mean, there was one guy who recently had a paper rejected because it was revealed that he had been using ChatGPT. The best quip, and I'll repeat this, is that ChatGPT is basically sparkling autocomplete. It just simply puts together what is the most statistically likely next word when you give it a string of words. Let me expand on that a bit. We're going to take a look at the arts. So here's the 41 symphonies Mozart wrote. These exist in a space. I don't know how many dimensions it has, but this is all the symphonies Mozart wrote. It's clearly more than 2 dimensions because some are major keys, a couple in minor keys. Some have short second movements, some have longer ones. If you ask ChatGPT to put where his next Mozart symphony might be had he lived to write one, he might pick that sphere, the blue check on the lower left side of this domain. Why? Because ChatGPT will have looked at the existing symphonies and said, okay, statistically speaking, the most likely string of notes would be this, and it would come up with one that would fit in this space of all Mozartian symphonies over there. Here's the problem. If Mozart had lived to produce a 42nd symphony, it would have been off yonder, right? Because Mozart didn't want to produce a symphony in this style of Mozart. He wanted to do something utterly new and different. Let's take a look at another one of my heroes, Beethoven. Here's the first 8 symphonies, also arrayed in a similar space of Beethoven's symphonies. If you ask ChatGPT where the 9th would be, it would be within that space. If it were way out yonder, you'd say, oh, the program's wrong. But what did Beethoven do for the 9th? Oh, my Lord, there's a choir. There are soloists. The 4th movement starts out with singing. There is nothing in any of Beethoven's prior work that would suggest his next symphony would be out there. Way different from everything that had come before. But if you ask ChatGPT to come up with a 10th symphony, the question I would like you to ponder is, would the algorithm more likely pick that blue one in the lower right hand of the domain of known symphonies, or would it more likely pick something out there? If Beethoven were writing, he'd pick the one out there. He didn't want to do the same thing. He wanted to do something different. But if ChatGPT picked something that was that different, we'd say it's malfunctioning. It could come up with a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare. You could feed it all 154 sonnets of Shakespeare, and it'd produce something that sounded like a Shakespearean sonnet. But if you gave it 150 of Shakespeare's sonnets to gnaw on, it would come up with something, but it would not come up with the last 3 or 4. It would not. It could come up with 10,000 symphonies. And I will say 2 things. First of all, none of them would be the last, and none of them would be worth reading, because all it's doing is shuffling words around on a page. So, successful AI is going to test people, not replicate our flawed way of thinking. People make errors in thought. I have a list of the most common habits of thought, the sunk cost fallacy, the appeal to emotion. There's a whole bunch of them. I have studies looking at how people learned to think. The two major flaws in the way we learn to think, first of all, are ballistic trajectory. That is a beginning and a middle and an end. That's the model of how we look at things. How did we learn that? Well, we learned it because 100,000 years ago, we're here and the food's over there. So I'm going to pick up a rock and I'm going to throw it at the food. And in order to do that successfully, I have to be able to predict how the rock will fly through the air and hit the thing. Now let's make it harder. The food's over there and it's moving. So I'm going to pick up a rock and I want to throw the rock so that it hits where the animal is going to be. So I've got to figure out the rock's trajectory and the likely next move of the animal. Let's make it even harder still. The food's over there and it's running. And I'm on the back of a horse and it's running. And I've got to figure out how to aim and fire my bow so that the arrow hits the food at that appropriate future location. So very early on, we trained our minds to be able to predict the ballistic trajectory of something. And that's part of everything that happens now. A lot of the way we think has to do with our penchant for beginning a little. The concept of the law of causality is simply an expression of our need for this beginning, middle, and an end. Another thing that perturbs our flawed way of thinking is magical thinking. Again, we'll turn the clock back to, say, 50,000 years ago. We're wandering around the veldt in sub-Saharan Africa, and we hear a rustle in the grass. So either it's something or it's nothing. Either I react or I don't react. If I don't react, if it's nothing, nothing happens. If it's something, if I don't react, then maybe the predator comes roaring out of the grass and I get eaten. On the other hand, if I hear something out there and I do react and run and hide in a cave, maybe there wasn't anything there, but I don't get it. And what that means is magical thinking becomes part of our way of thinking and looking at the world. If we don't think deeply, we think fast, and when we think fast, we fall prey to all of the bad habits of thought, including ballistic trajectory and magical thinking. There is a test called the Turing test. Alan Turing was a brilliant computer scientist. He helped crack the code of the Enigma machine in the late 30s and 40s. His insight when asked, does a machine think, was to say, well, ask it a question, and if you believe that the answer is something that a human being would say, well, then that's thinking. I'd like to go the next step. I think we need to go beyond that simple test and ask, does this response reflect some knowledge about an open domain in the way that a human being would think about it? That is, does it confine itself to the boundaries of known stuff, or does it allow us to go beyond? Where AI can really help is when you have a large set of things that need to be analyzed quickly. So I give you 100,000 proteins, and I want AI to tell me which are the most likely candidates to cure a particular disease. And it'll grind on that all night, and it'll give you the top 10 the next morning because it's good at that kind of problem. Bounded situations, it's great. But ChatGPT is autocomplete. I don't think there's much more beyond it for that. Now, one of the things I do, I have references in these presentations, and I'd like to point out a couple of things. First of all, thinking fast and slow, excellent reference. You want to learn about that? Purdue has a list of logical fallacies. Joe Weizenbaum, who was at MIT when I was an undergraduate there, wrote a program called ELIZA, was also known as Doctor. And his book, Computer Power and Human Reason, talks about the sham and delusion that people fall into when they think they're talking with a computer and they think they're getting answers and advice. Now, an interesting point about that, ELIZA is a very simple program. You give it a sentence and it'll turn it around into a question and play it back to you. It also looks for keywords. So if you say, I'm feeling bad today, the ELIZA program will say, why are you feeling bad today? And if you say, well, I had a fight with my mother, mother is one of the key words. They'll say, tell me more about your mother. And over time, people think they're having a conversation with a Rogerian non-directional therapist. And in fact, Weizenbaum talked about how he came into his office and his assistant was engaged in a conversation with a computer program. And as he walked in, she shielded the screen so he couldn't see what was going on. Now, that was what elicited his comment that this is a sham and a delusion. It's just a program. There's no intelligence in it at all. But there's another perspective which says it's a human product. If I can be moved to tears by a great Mozartian symphony, if I can have my spirit uplifted by looking at a wonderful painting, then why not a computer program? Okay. But don't think that there's more there than there actually is. The idea behind artificial intelligence at this point is to rearrange words in the simplest and easiest way possible and to give us something that looks plausibly like the language we are used to. And for that, it's great. But to seek more from that can leave you a little bit aside. I will make a copy of this deck available. And at this point, I'd like to open up to any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Bill. There were no questions that I saw that we couldn't answer. I did have a couple questions for you myself, though. So
Okay.
how do we, right? And this is a question I get a lot, is how do we secure AI? So if we're using AI in our products, how do we make sure it's safe and not going to do something malicious or get taken over?
Well, the vulnerabilities in AI are concentrated in two areas. One is the training set, and one is the immediate information that it's looking at and its immediate response. The training set is exceptionally vulnerable. In fact, you probably heard that if you ask ChatGPT a mathematical question, it'll give you an answer. And if the program, the particular language model you're using, was trained on data prior to 2021, it'll get 10 out of 10 mathematical questions right. Interestingly, if you ask the same program that's been trained on data from the most recent 3 years, it'll get 10 out of 10 wrong. I mean, just for the heck of it, I tweeted 2 + 5 = 17. Now that's out there, and somebody's language model is going to ingest it and say, we have a use case, 2 + 5 = 17. We should remember that. I will assure you that training sets can be polluted. They can be corrupted. Spending a little more time, you can train an AI to ignore certain symptoms. We've seen that a lot with visual AI technologies. By altering a very small number, less than 0.1% of the pixels in an image, the AI will say, I'm not looking at a bunny, I'm looking at an oil derrick. Whenever you say, well, that's a bunny. Well, it's not. Because what AI does is they take each pixel as a dimension, and then they score the relative distance, and the outliers are the most significant ones. And so when you modify just a few of these, all of a sudden the most significant pixels to the visual AI are going to be the things that lead you to conclude that it's something entirely not. You can put 3 pieces of electrical tape on a stop sign, and your car's AI will interpret it to say speed limit 45. That's the second area of vulnerability. That's the corrupted input. To a human being, it looks like a sign that somebody's messed with a little bit. To the visual AI, it is an entirely different thing from a stop sign. It has some traits in common with it, but it has the key indicators that tell us this is a speed limit sign. And the last thing is the output. The results of an AI process have to be checked by a human being to see if they are right, appropriate, full. When you get those 10 molecules that are most likely to solve your problem of curing a particular disease with a set of proteins, you have to test them. You don't want to just mix them up and start inoculating people, because there will be errors, flaws, omissions, things that have to be corrected, things that have to be fixed in the next generation. Again, when I was a student, we had a chess grandmaster who was working on one of the very early chess playing programs, and the guys putting it together, we called them hackers then, but that was good hackers. Nobody uses that language anymore. The guys who were putting it together on the verge of a match got really, really excited about some new tweak they've come up with for the algorithm, and they slapped that code in there and they put it into a tournament, and on the 10th move, the program sacrificed its queen. It was like, what? Then, yeah, it just doesn't work quite the way you think it works. The side effects are vast. Yeah.
So Bill, there's a couple questions in the chat we have now that I'll have you answer. Kind of off of that, it says, how can we guard ourselves, clients, customers against the possibilities and different ways somebody can use AI to be malicious? How do we protect ourselves against malicious AI?
Well, right now, the people who are using malicious AI are trying to do it for the same reason they tried to use other malware in the past. They want to convince you to spend money on something. They want to convince you to vote some way. They want to convince you to open a switch that should stay closed, and so on. So it's not the fact that there's an AI engine behind it. You have to take a look at the immediate thing itself, the output of the AI, and say, now, what is this really asking me to do? Is this a ransom note? Is this, an audio recording of somebody who, I care for, and I thought they were back home in New Jersey, but this says they're traveling and they're in trouble in Ecuador. Always be prudent. I mean, we want to complete patterns. That's part of this ballistic trajectory thing. So we want to fill in the blanks. Temper that. I'm not saying don't be empathetic. I'm certainly not saying tone down your humanity. I'm just simply saying, temper this with remembering that in a particular situation, you and your colleagues do have a set of capabilities and a set of responsibilities, and just try to temper them. Ask around. Say, does this make sense to you? Or you get a urgent mail from the CFO saying we've got to get this check out right away. Well, in that case, I think you'll probably be forgiven for asking your boss to call the CFO.
So it sounds like cybersecurity awareness training, right? Would be good?
Awareness is definitely part of it.
Awareness, being alert of what the latest trends are and what people are using stuff for to help you. Another question we had was, what are the real benefits we can communicate with our small business customers regarding the use of AI?
The real benefit?
Yep.
Right now, the best thing you can say is using AI inside of the right context within, in the case of information security, you'll be able to place questions to the system and get answers from the system that are more intelligible. You'll be able to make sense out of complex bodies of data with much less effort. Again, really small, you're going to use a third party as a SOC. That SOC is going to be much more efficient, and therefore they're going to be more successful as a business, because they will have the leverage of a properly trained, properly curated set of AI that has good data coming in and is being properly checked on the way out.
So that's perfect segue into how does Trend use AI in our products or with our new companion in Vision One to help small business customers or any customers that we have for that matter?
Well, we still are using the machine learning capability to filter spam emails. So that's 19 years and going. We have the capability in Vision One to use AI to take a plain text question and turn it into a SQL query. So you can ask Vision One, what are all instances where somebody might have looked at this email with that attachment? And it'll put together the appropriate SQL to make that query happen. It'll give you the list. So it does the hard part for you, because that's well-defined, bounded set. And on the way out, when a result comes back, Companion will help you translate that into something that you can then put into an email that your SOC can manage directly and reflect back to you. So it saves time, it simplifies complex and potentially error-prone procedures, and gives you a higher sense of confidence. But remember, not all AI is going to do that. You have to have a well-curated learning set. You have to have proper controls over the input the thing is dealing with in real time.
Perfect. And then I think you kind of answered this one. But with AI getting so many things wrong, this leaves people in a vulnerable position. How do we address this? I think you kind of address that with like clean data sets. The information going into the AI models needs to be clean, identified that's appropriate for the business use case that it's in. Does that sound accurate?
Properly curated stuff. And don't ask AI to do more than it can do. I mean, for the time being, keep your hands on the wheel while you're driving. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen some examples where different government entities are using AI to approve and deny benefits for people. And because it's written in a program and people are trying to counter and say, I should qualify for these benefits, they're having trouble talking to somebody who can actually make that change for them because it's a computer doing it and programming team making those changes, right? So I've seen some legality issues around this. So having that clean data set, making sure the parameters are set correctly, making sure everything is accurate as can be, right? You still might have issues. I mean, that's just the world we live in, right?
Right. Yeah, I would much rather, if somebody is sending me an AI generated thing. In fact, the European Commission is discussing regulations right now that will require any AI generated material to be labeled as such. And if it's something having to do with my health, my benefits, I would want not only to have a notice that it was generated by AI, but also have the phone number for a human being who can then explain to me what's going on. Because see, this is what happens with automation. We think, it's gonna take away my job. No, it's gonna take away the rote stuff, the routine stuff. And now your job is gonna get harder because you're gonna be dealing with all the problems you never had time to deal with before, which is actually gonna make life better for everybody involved. But we have to remember to keep that step in place.
Yep. Cool. I think that's about all the questions we had. Yeah, everybody, thank you for joining. We have a couple QR codes on the screen here. One's a feedback survey. Please take that, give us feedback, let us know what we can do better. The other one is for the Real Cybersecurity podcast on Spotify that Bill runs. So our next session will be October 18th to discuss attack surface risk management. We look forward to seeing everybody then. We'll send a follow-up email to make sure everybody has all the information from today in the presentation as well. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Bill, and hope everybody has a great day.
Take care.